Next, I'm pleased to welcome our component standardization executives to share with you standardization activities, achievements, and advancements within their components. Within the DoD, each military department and some defense agencies have a designated standardization executive responsible for assisting in the development and implementation of DSP policies and procedures. They also serve as a member of the Defense Standardization Council. Today, you will hear from the Army's standardization executive, Mr. Myles Miyamasu, who's joining us virtually, the Air Force's standardization executive, Ms. Kristen Baldwin, and standing in for the Navy standardization executive is Dr. Dowd, who also happens to be the Navy Departmental Standardization Officer. They'll be discussing standardization challenges and opportunities with their components and how they are leveraging technology through standards. Should you have any questions, please hold them until after all of the panelists provide their update. And if you're in this room, I just want to please remind you to use the microphone and get close to the microphone so that those who are participating virtually can hear you. For those attending virtually, please put your questions in the chat or email your questions to dspquestions@lmi.org. So with that, I'd like to welcome our panelists and Ms. Baldwin to the podium.
All right, well, good morning. Great to be here today to celebrate the awards, to celebrate another 2 years of the Defense Standardization Program. It's been terrific to be able to be involved with this program, Michael's office, for quite a number of years now. Currently with the Department of the Air Force, so I'm here representing Air Force and Space Force standardization activities, and we'll provide you an update on what's going on here. Let's see. All right. So what I'm going to, reflecting on one of the policy documents that Mr. Sims shared with us, kind of a government-wide national standards activity, I'm going to share with you from a Department of the Air Force perspective some of our accomplishments, some challenges, and some opportunities that we see. Some of the themes that you've already started to hear, digital, modular, open systems, things that we've been working as a community on. These things persist. I would say that within the Department of the Air Force, quite an uptick, quite a leadership and strategic imperative is seen by the opportunity that technology today affords us to standardize along these key elements of digital, model-based, modular, and open. And so we are part of a really, really important community for certain with the Department of the Air Force. I'm going to focus one of our opportunities. I'll share with you a pilot activity that we operated with what we call the DICE, part of our Air Force Institute of Technology. We've stood up a Digital Innovation and Integration Center of Excellence, the DICE. And so we actually have Colonel Slasnik and our DICE director, as well as Dr. Rich Ott. I made them move up to the front row because I was talking about them, and here they are in the audience. So for any follow-on questions at the end of my presentation and after our panel, they'll be around here today to participate with you all. So as far as accomplishments, I wanted to point out a couple things. First of all, our Air Force Materiel Command, we helped complete the latest update, change 1 of MIL Standard 882 Echo. When we get to our challenges slide, I'll talk a little bit more, as well as our pilot, a little bit more about, the massive undertaking it is to be the lead standardization activity authority for joint system safety. In the second bullet, from an operational plans and programs view, our directorate in Air Force Material Command A589, they have successfully been maintaining and leading configuration control boards that are maintaining and updating standards for our messaging and tactical data links. This includes variable message formats, integrated broadcast service, MADL, which is our multifunction advanced data link. These are critical to joint fires, joint operations, not just Air Force, joint operations and international partnerships and international operations with our NATO allies. And finally, our office and SAF AQR, we are continuing to push forward on MOSA implementation. I actually have from my office, Cliff Loudon is here. He'll be here with you today and tomorrow. Kate Harris is our engineering and specialty program and standardization office supervisor, our branch chief. She's here as well. But Cliff leads this activity for me in areas of MOSA as well as defense standardization. As Tom mentioned, one of the initiatives that we see opportunities for is advanced manufacturing. Really was impressed by a 10-year review that we did of our DoD Additive Manufacturing Institute, America Makes. And, they're doing a great job, but they can't do it alone. And boy, is our peer competitor really doubling, tripling, quadrupling, whatever the next, term is, down on production and implementation of additive manufacturing technology. We as a nation need to get behind this. And one of the ways that we can continue to engage with and lead additive manufacturing, not only the advancement of technology and machines, but also the implementation of parts and ability to implement those additively manufactured parts and materials into our systems. We've got to be engaged through the standardization community to lead those standards so that they're not led by our competitors. So that we're full on support of that. And then I also mentioned here another accomplishment, in terms of digital engineering, we've continued our digital material management initiative in the Department of the Air Force. I'm not going to be speaking about those details here today, but a lot is available online on our website. And one of the things that we have done since I last spoke to you at this forum was we produced another update to our digital building code. This update was dual signed by both SAEs, both service acquisition executives of the Air Force and the Space Force. And it lays out expectations for implementing digital model-based engineering practices, open systems, standards and architectures, and agile development practices. So that's all there. We're undergoing an update. And what's been great about this third update that we're going to release to this digital building code is we've involved our industry counterparts. We received upwards of 200 to 300 comments on our digital building code and how we could adapt it, modernize it, mature it to make it seamlessly linked with what our industry counterparts are investing in. Talk about a way to standardize and engage, this critical integration. We view digital material management as unprecedented government and industry collaboration, and you do that through the advancements of digital and model-based standards. Some challenges that we have. The work, I mentioned the work on MIL Standard 882, our joint system safety standard. It's requires significant manpower, and I'm going to show you a digital visual of the standard. And you can just see the amount of manpower to review and adjudicate the update to that overhaul and update of that MIL standard. Massive amount of change requests and really an inability, other than human manually identifying linkages and downstream effects and interdependencies is really a major challenge. And so it became an opportunity for us to think about how do we digitally standardize our standards? How do we move our standardization program from paper to digital? And so I think we're making some good progress, just as Tom shared that vision with you this morning. From a Air Force Material Command standpoint, we're partnering with our Material Command as we lead those activities as preparing activity and lead standardization activity. So let me get into some of the opportunities. While we, as I mentioned, we have our leadership in the Department of the Air Force. This includes our 4-star commanders of our Space Systems Command and our Air Force Material Command, as well as our 2 SAEs, and now really recognized by our Secretary of the Air Force. DAF, the Department of the Air Force, is on a journey for digital transformation. We really envision a complete acquisition ecosystem where we can plan and manage and execute our programs entirely digitally through shared digital environments and employ digital tools that will be able to be engaged by not only engineering functions, but also producibility functions, manufacturing functions, contracting, business management. That's why our General Richardson adopted the term digital materiel management. As you think about the materiel life cycle, it involves everything coming together to deliver a capability. It really truly is the .mil PF that, this is involved to include training. And so our digital approach is building on the foundational digital engineering work, but expanding it throughout all those functions and throughout that entire life cycle. This gives us a benefit of being able to save time, be more efficient, streamline tools, maintaining data integrity. This is a challenge as well as an opportunity, truly. And if we standardize correctly, we'll avoid loss through formatting, different schemas. We'll be able to consistently model and share data, many of which is not all human readable. And so we're going to be able to use these tools to help communicate with the data and learn from the data and have these tools be able to tell us what is evolving and what is the true understanding of the system or the process or the function that we're modeling. To get there, we really need a method that is going to help us to ingest all of the artifacts, all of our legacy artifacts. And we need tools. And we need tools that can help us to integrate these functions. So for example, I'm going to talk about one of the opportunities that we see is sort of a unification of certification activities. So right now we separately certify our systems, whether they are safety certified or certified for nuclear surety, cyber certification, safety certification. All those certifications, as we well know, they build on and they evaluate common core system model data. And so if we can unify some of those tools, those processes, those methodologies through a standardized approach, we can achieve massive efficiency and modernize all of those disciplines, making it more iterative and learning from each other, but also delivering an ability to have faster, more efficient certification, which is going to deliver our systems faster and actually be able to be responsive faster. When we have to change a system or recertify a part, that is a massive undertaking from an aerospace system airworthiness perspective, as well as space systems. So there's a real payoff. That's the payoff that we see. So I'm going to get into a little bit of a description of this pilot effort activity. And I think I in addition, maybe what I didn't mention that's on this slide is, our acquisition documentation. Miles and miles high of paper. We've always seen those pictures as we come to a major defense acquisition decision. We've got paper-based documents that are filtered around the Pentagon for approval, and so what we are now being able to see is we can ingest those documents digitally as well, and we can find ways to communicate effectively across those functions and help our decision makers really understand the critical items and risk areas or cost drivers, schedule drivers that are driven by all of those different acquisition function documents. I mentioned certification artifacts here, but as well as things like systems engineering plans, program protection plans, cybersecurity strategies, test and evaluation master plans. These are all things that we can now ingest digitally and review and benefit from deeper understanding of the integration of all of those acquisition disciplines that are so important to understanding the appropriate program cost, schedule, and performance certification. So what we did is we worked with our DICE team at AFIT, and they had a tool available, and we asked DICE to model the MIL Standard 882 document. And so what you can kind of see here at this, kind of lightly colored depiction, that's the MIL Standard. Each node this was modeled into a tool called Metra. Each tree is an amalgamation of the sections of the MIL standard connected by nodes. Each node is size scaled based on the amount of text or, kind of the magnitude of description and guidance related to that particular section. And this allows us really to graphically examine the MIL standard and target areas for improvement. So I explained we're undertaking with the joint working group and a complete overhaul of this MIL standard, which has great impacts, commercial as well as defense impacts. And so now this is helping us to graphically understand the document, target areas for improvement, but that's not all. So the next step that we took, if I can have the next slide, please, is we asked the team at DICE, and they use large language modeling to start to help us to identify what documents, what standards, what policies are interdependent with MIL Standard 882, which has been around for decades. And so there are hundreds of interdependencies with other policies and other standards. And we need, if we're going to be effective in our update and overhaul of this MIL standard, we need to be aware of the downstream effects of changes that we might make in one and how that ripples across. So believe it or not, this is a graphical representation of actual ingest of over 100 policy documents that have relationships to MIL Standard 882. It takes about 30 minutes to ingest a document and continue to populate this graphical representation. The center of the circle is actually the MIL Standard 882. That next row is its relationships with other documents, and then how it is, and then the outermost row is additional thematic areas and sections of document policy. So we are going to be able to use this tool to understand implications, interrelationships, downstream effects. So we can target a node, and it can build out that chain for us. So this is, we think, a great step towards the future for this community of developing your non-government standards, our MIL standards, our consensus-based standards in a way that they can be digitally ingested and understood. And so we want to start this journey with you all. And so I think this is really kind of Tam and I were talking at the table. This is quite similar to his depiction of, you know, where we are today in manual standards, you know, documented and written in paper, and you know, the vision that he described. You know, currently we've got a very robust repository of human readable standards. We have a capability and several tools that are out there that are helping us to ingest PDFs, also ingest tables, and there's a lot of great commercial tool innovation that's happening in this space. We worked with Tom's office and with several defense industry partners and the Air Force team to create the first fully digital DID, as Tom described, for the FMICA capability that's now SysML readable, and we're piloting that with one of our Air Force programs. But in the future, where we want to go is we want to see this fully digital ecosystem. Think not just engineering and think not just one function, but across our entire community, incorporating and inclusive, and have a better department-wide strategy to really achieve these overarching updates, better ability to configuration, manage what we have, you know, work on overage issues that plague us, keep track of even the POCs, that we have such personnel turnover among all of our services and communities and agencies and industry. And so we need to, you know, it becomes very challenging to say, okay, well, who's in charge of this again? And that's where we are today. Where we want to be in the future is to be able to have this fully trained and receptive workforce, able to interact with standards and able to utilize them in a much different way than we probably can today. So once again, I wanted to share with you, you know, kind of some of the POCs. As I mentioned, Colonel Slasnik is here, Dr. Ott is here with us, but here is their contact info. I hope you don't mind. I went ahead and put those in there. Our DICE, Digital Innovation and Integration Center of Excellence, part of our DMM, Digital Material Management activity, at AFIT, the link to the AFIT site is there. So you can get involved in some of the research and program support activities that we're doing. And then maybe this is my last slide. I just wanted to share with you, you know, I talked about this one aspect. Last time I talked to you and you know, with many of you as partners, I've talked about MOSA, you know, that was a big theme and it still is a big theme. Digital material management, big theme. Digital standardization and certification. So this is a great nexus of all of these activities, underpinned by many of the common thinking and common tools and technologies. And so I see this community that's gathered here today as part of these other communities that are working on open systems, government reference architectures, as well as our digital material management initiative. And with that, I will step down for the rest of our panel to talk and look forward to any questions that you have.
Good morning. Can you hear me? All right. Anybody that knows Dr. Seidel, you know that I'm not him. He's like the power forward. I'm more the point guard. He sends his regards, but he wasn't able to attend because he's transitioned over to become the principal civilian deputy for ASN RDNA. And if he was here, though, he would talk about civility and talk about how, you know, we're all very busy, but we are all on the same team. We're all on the same side. Right? So we can be civil while we're getting our job done and working together. So if you remember, that's what we talked about last year whenever he was here. And then also I wanted to mention my old boss, Reverend Lloyd. He just retired about 2 months ago. He would talk about how, this is in regards to being on the same team, he would talk about how it's not, and people you work with, it's not we and they. We're all we, unless you're he would say, unless you're Russia, China, or Iran, you're part of we. They're they, and we're all part of that side. So our pronoun should be we, and we're all working together. Thank you.
Good. Mr. Miyamasu?
He will need to unmute his phone. He has unmuted.
He is unmuted. Okay. Mr. Miyamasu, we're seeing your slides here in the room.
Yeah. Can you hear me okay?
We can.
Okay.
Excellent.
Let me try this also just to show you proof of life and see if the video works. But I'll probably, if it doesn't work, I'll turn it off just for saving bandwidth, if that's okay.
Yes, we can see you. Good morning.
Okay.
Thank you for joining us.
All right. Hey, everybody, I apologize for not being on time, but glad to be here and looking forward to both all the comments that have been made so far today have been really informative, and any questions that folks might have later on. Hey, I'm Myles Miyamasu, and I am, during the day, I wear the hat of the Army Material Command's G3. But today I'll be giving an overview brief really of the Army standardization activities. And I'd like to thank the efforts of Michael and the Defense Standardization Program Office for all that they are doing for us and for hosting this conference. And I also would like to thank the fellow services for all the work that they are doing as we work together in the joint space of standardization. I wish I could be there with you all, but just due to schedules for our senior leaders, they asked me to kind of watch the house today. And so please forgive my physical absence at this great conference. So if we can go to the next slide, and I'll go off camera just to save some bandwidth for everybody. So really the next slide, if it's showing, it's just our agenda slide. And really, this is really the crux of the things that I'll talk to, a couple of examples in every area, and then closing up with really the challenges. I'll give you a couple that the Army is running into for now, but there might be some bleed over to others that may in fact be experiencing the same. And if not, I would be also glad to take any kinds of input on maybe how we could kind of get around some of that. Let's go to the next slide. So from a standardization activities perspective, with over 6,000 active documents in the ASSIST database, the Army has been busy with its standardization program. In fact, in FY23, the Army completed over 800 standardization projects. To date, in FY24, over 500 standardization projects are completed. These standardization projects include efforts to publish new documents and add them to the ASSIST database. As an example, MIL Standard 3076, which provides guidelines for structural demonstrations for rotorcraft, as well as revisions to existing documents and executing the mandatory 5-year review and validation of existing documents. The work is accomplished across the Army's 38 standardization management activities. 2 of those SMAs were recently established within the past year, both of which are related to the initiative to identify MOSA enabling standards. And these are the U.S. Army PEO Aviation and U.S. Army AFC DevCom C5 ISR Center MOSA Management Office. If we can go to the next slide. There are some success stories that we'd like to talk to you about. We have highlighted a few of the many successes from the Army Standardization Program. First is the Army's 2023 Standardization Achievement Award winner for their efforts with the abatement of carcinogens in plated fasteners. For over 50 years, cadmium and hexavalent chromium have been used as corrosion inhibitors. DevCom Ground Vehicle Systems Center engaged in efforts to eliminate thousands of parts and fasteners containing these hazardous materials and enable acquisition and sustainment of clean hardware options. As a result, a mill specification was developed for zinc nickel electroplating for fasteners. Over 250 government and non-government specifications were identified for review and update. Commercial item descriptions were developed and industry specifications updated, all of which enhance the safety and welfare of our soldiers. The benefits of the effort can be applied to systems across the DoD. Next is the Army's 2022 Standardization Achievement Award winner for efforts with multifunctional chemical agent resistant coatings, or CARC. This is a far-reaching effort as CARC coatings are required on all tactical and related support equipment in the Army inventory. The Marine Corps has similar requirements as well, and CARC are also used by allies during joint missions. The DEVCOM Army Research Lab continues to make valuable accomplishments with this project. Their efforts have resulted in significant advances in terms of improved performance, sustainability, safety, interoperability, and establishment of requirements to ensure approved coating is provide enhanced functionality for the mission. Next is DEVCOM Armament Center efforts with Arctic weather lubricants. The DoD has increased its focus on maintaining readiness for operations in global Arctic regions. There are over 100 DoD weapon systems across the services, ranging from small arms to aircraft, that require Arctic weather weapon lubricants. DEVCOM AC engaged with commercial manufacturers to encourage the development of new Arctic weather weapon lubricants, because prior to this effort, only 2 Arctic weather weapon lubricants were included on the DoD qualified products list. This led to the submission of 2 new product samples, which were tested and met mill specification requirements, allowing them to be added to the DoD qualified products list. Next is the AMC Logistics Data Analysis Center for their standardization efforts. LDAC is a center of expertise for product support analysis and logistics product data, and responsible for government and non-government PSA LPD publications. LDAC serves as chair for the SAE International Lifecycle Logistics Supportability Committee, and in that role, led efforts to revise and publish 2 industry documents adopted for use by the DoD. SAE AS 1390, the industry standard for level of repair analysis, and SAE TA-HB-0007-1, the industry guidance for developing logistics product data summaries. LDAC also served as the Army's leading contributor in the mandated assessment for potential adoption and implementation of the S-Series specifications. LDAC assessed the 7 S-Series specifications and provided the Army's perspective, which significantly contributed to the final recommendation. Now, I am somewhat partial to the LDAC, as I've seen firsthand the leadership, talent, and innovation they possess to solve a wide-ranging set of problems for the Army and our joint force. If we could go to the next slide, please. So for ongoing Army standardization efforts, the Army has made significant accomplishments in its standardization efforts, and there continues to be many ongoing efforts where the standardization workforce is actively engaged. Many of those efforts support the initiatives of the National Standards Strategy for Critical and Emerging Technology to educate and empower the standards workforce, as well as engage with the private sector and various standards developing organizations in the development of standards. The following is a portion of the ongoing efforts within the Army. Regarding the education of the standards workforce, AMC LDAC actively collaborates with DAU on courses for various subjects. Currently, LDAC is coordinating with DAU to provide SME assistance on DAU LOG 0580, which is the Standards, Specifications, and Technical Publications course, with the goal of improving standardization training. Another ongoing effort at AMC LDAC is a joint service initiative to revise MIL-HDBK-502 Product Support Analysis Handbook, which is the military guidance for implementing the industry standard SAE TA-STD-0017, Product Support Analysis. While this is a military handbook, LDAC has leveraged the insight and expertise of industry and our international partners through SAE International, as well as service and industry partners as chair of the Product Support Analysis Working Group. Also, the Army actively collaborates with different standards developing organizations to include SAE International and ISO, supporting the emphasis for involvement with critical and emerging technologies. The Army is heavily involved with various Defense Standardization Program Office initiatives as well. The Army is a key contributor in efforts to address DoD type designation with CCOM, DEVCOM, and HQDA representatives providing vital expertise. The Army is actively engaged with the initiative to identify and further define MOSA enabling standards and specifications. And then finally, thinking back to the beginning of the presentations where we mentioned the large number of standardization projects the Army has completed, there are many projects still underway. The Army currently has over 400 active standardization projects. Another significant area for the Army that we're addressing is overage documents. While the Army has over 6,000 active documents in ASSIST, we also have over 1,000 overage documents, creating a constant need for attention to ensure we continue to reduce our overage documents. Next slide, please. As far as challenges go, I'm just going to talk really to these two. There are several others, probably not as impactful, but while the Army has made significant accomplishments, there are challenges that we're facing. And one of these challenges is in optimizing our available resources for standardization work. Our standardization offices often report their work as either underfunded or under-resourced for the amount of effort that is required of them. Many standardization offices have other primary job duties, requiring those offices to attempt to balance the Army standardization program efforts with those other missions. Another challenge is in the ability of the workforce to obtain the standards that are required for use. A DoD policy requires the use of commercial non-government standards when it is applicable. However, the DoD lacks a global subscription service. As a result, individual standards and/or subscription services must be purchased on an organizational basis. For some within the Army, this has been addressed. AMC and Army Futures Command have an ACURIS, formerly Information Handling Service, standard subscription contract for access to many of these non-government standards, but the subscription does not include access for ASALT or our PEOs. From the Army perspective, a DoD-wide consolidated standard subscription service to complement DoD policy on using commercial standards could be beneficial. So in summary, the Army has done a lot, but we have more to do. Thank you to everyone for what you are doing in this challenge space. The work is hard, but impactful. Thanks for being wonderful teammates, and we look forward to working with you into the future. And this concludes our briefing. Thank you.
All right, thank you, Mr. Miyamasu. So I'll kick us off with questions, and then again, for those in the audience, if you have a question, please speak close to the mic, and for those online, use the chat function.
Please, if you're online, use the Q&A function, which is the question mark logoed at the bottom of your screen. The chat is disabled.
Okay, so
Thank you.
not the chat, the Q&A function.
Perfect.
Thank you.
I'll also encourage everyone to please get closer than you think you need to, and feel free to pick these up and move them. It really is best to basically be almost about to take a bite. So feel free, and a lot of these question interactive sessions, people will be afraid to like just pull them over into their area. But if you have it over to the side like this, it's not going to pick you up. So feel free to just pick it up.
So I'll kick us off with the question here. We've heard about the National Standard Strategy for Critical and Emerging Technology a couple times now, and the National Defense Science and Technology Strategy as well, both of which highlight the importance of actively engaging in standards development with industry, academia, and allies and partners. So what is your component doing, or what more can the DoD be doing across the components to remove barriers and prioritize participation in standards development?
Maybe I'll start. I actually wanted to mention, I failed to mention one of our Space Force accomplishments when I was up there, and this plays well into your first question, Mike, about, I think last time I was here, I briefed that our Space Systems Command was establishing a consortium with IEEE and ISTO for a space system standards alliance to bring together and standardize ground systems, space systems, and the comm links between. They've made significant progress, and one of the things that they've done is publish 2 common payload interface standards. But this is it's an example of what we're doing to really be more proactive with the standardization bodies and with our industry partners. This alliance that was set up has representatives from Space Force, from NASA, and from NRO. So we've got intergovernment agencies. It has representation from defense and commercial industry in this consortium alliance, and as well as the IEEE and ISTO. So that's just a great model, and I think in 2 years, kind of being active, they've really just done fantastic. Space Systems Command has. In addition, following this kind of model, we've stood up in the Department of the Air Force, but we're doing this with the government participation in mind. For digital material management, which I talked a lot about, we've established 2 consortiums with industry. So an industry association consortium that's being led by NDIA. But think of this as a association of associations. So already AIAA is involved, OMG, and multiple services and agencies. Associated with that just overarching opportunity to convene, work the same problems, build that collaboration, like you're mentioning, Mike. We then have just recently are in the process of announcing and reviewing proposals for a digital consortium, which will actually be sort of a paid activity to kind of do co-development of some of the most challenging areas that need attention. But those are some examples of how the Department of the Air Force is partnering public-private partnerships to advance some of these activities.
Excellent.
That was a great strategic answer. Thank you for that. Can you hear me? I would say as the Navy DSPO and maybe a little bit more of a tactical answer, we expect our warrant holders to in their areas of responsibility to reach out to the commercial standards and work with them to understand what they're doing, maybe help direct what they're doing, and then also know that area to where if it needs to be a military unique standard, they at least know what's going on commercially and going on adjacent to the spec they're going to write and write in those areas. I think it's a collateral, tends to be like kind of collateral duty for people. So the comment from the Army that more resources or optimizing resources to focus on this, I think resonates with me. Over.
Okay. Mr. Miyamasu, anything to add online?
Yeah, thank you, Mike. Very, very similar to really both of the leaders that commented earlier. I would say that from a prioritization perspective, I'm not sure necessarily, and I'm speaking from the Army, that there is a big challenge space there because I think within the respective communities, there is a prioritization effort across services, and I think it gets communicated up to the OSD joint level for at least awareness of our efforts. I would say that over time, when you go through time as a continuum, there are things that probably levy into maybe changing someone's priorities, whether it's a service or really from an OSD perspective. So I would say that I don't think that there are any barriers per se that exist from a prioritization perspective. And maybe there's a way that Army internally can work different schemas, if you might, that help us codify some of the prioritization decisions we make. Although I would say that although we're doing pretty good, I think we could always improve in those areas. And when I do mention schema, I think those variables that kind of go into what's the criteria for rank ordering 1 to N, or at least 1 to most readily available that we can do, might be able to help us kind of get after some of our overage document challenges that we're facing. And then finally, inside of the Army itself, I do commend really the community inside our service for really working in a space that I think is very technical and demanding, quite honestly. But as I mentioned before, some of it's probably under-resourced from a requirements perspective or an authorizations perspective. And we're going to continue to work in that area to try to elevate the importance of why these positions, as they show up on TDAs, need to be a resource to help us probably move quicker, if you might, on the areas that are important to OSD.
Okay, thank you. Question from the audience, Ted?
Not a question, but a comment that some people might not be aware of. I believe back in the 2017 NDAA, there was a language directing OSD ATNL to look at provisions for standards access for all of OSD and defense agencies. I believe it fell below the line for funding, and it didn't have any directly appropriated funds to support. So it didn't happen. Maybe that's something that can be brought forward and looked at again.
Yes, thank you.
And along with that, from U.S. Army PEO simulation training instrumentation, we're probably one of the Army's smaller PEOs, but there is an extreme challenge in trying to use the industry standards. The ASME standards are required on all our engineering drawings. It's the way we do business, the logistics standards. We incorporate them into our contracts, but generally don't have access. And in fairness to ASME, they got tired of government stealing the standards. So they implemented data rights management. If you don't have an active subscription, if your computer crashes and you got to reload them, or even if your help desk transfers them, they need a whole new key for each and every standard. It needs to be refreshed, or it's just poof, the PDF is gone. And that is a real challenge to, especially, I seem to be one of the seniors at our work, and we've got a lot of youngsters in my eyes that don't know and don't have access. Over.
Thank you, and we recognize the need. Speaking from DSPO, right? We following the NDAA language and the FY17 Act, we made multiple attempts, and it did fall below the line. It's still a priority in my eyes. We need to find a way to make it happen, to identify the funding and centralize it to provide access across the DoD workforce. Any other questions from the audience?
Yes,
Chris.
I'd like to say good morning to our distinguished guest and thank you for the Defense Standardization Program brief. On your slide that was about policymakers' implementation, you spoke about the interdependencies of these policies and the ripple effect that they have, and that you ingest sometimes over 100 different documents. My question to the panel is, how do you deconflict these 100 documents?
So I think this was part of the pilot, so that we're learning as we go. The whole purpose of that, so we identified the 100 documents, and so the goal was not to work on to necessarily solve the deconfliction problem, but to be more aware of the relationships so that as we update one of them, we know where to look to help minimize conflicts that we might be creating.
Thank you very much.
Yeah, and I would kind of see it as a hit list of the things you need to change whenever you go update those documents next time, right?
Oh, so exciting.
I have a related question for Ms. Baldwin, but I'd like to thank, this is very timely. I'd like to thank Michael and the DSPO and Ms. Baldwin for bringing up digital standardization. It's very timely because last week I got a question from the guys in the Navy who own Mill Standard 1472 on human factors engineering. And they said, I want to go digital. Okay, I don't know if anybody's ever done that. I don't know how to do it, so I'm learning today. And of course, there's a lot of interaction between 1472 human factors engineering and system safety. So 1472, it's a large document. It's got a very complex set of references, just like 882 does. So I'd like to learn more about what you're doing with 882. What kind of tool sets? Is it SysML as was brought up earlier as where we're going, or is it some other tool that you're going to put this into? You know, we're looking for something that's agnostic to the tools that the program uses for MBSE, but we want to feed those, right? So how do we create a digital version of the mill standard that can be fed into those tools?
Listen, I'm glad it's timely. Our question, our kind of our discussion is timely for you. I really would kind of defer to, you know, we got the contact info for you. And I think this conference and this engagement among our team here and my team leads, Ms. Harris, maybe I would just encourage kind of some follow on to think about how we can go with, you know, this initial pilot for this initial kind of purpose and where it could potentially go with more participation. Because what you're pointing out is great. How can I go from ingesting a mill standard once I digitize it to actually being part of and integrated with the model that our teams are that our program offices are building out. If Dr. Ott, if you wanted to.
I have one thing. I recommend you talk to Krista Luca. So Krista Luca is my specialty engineering person. Chris is really into developing models. He's the one who kind of led some of the FAMICA modeling using SysML, and he's really into human factors. So I can give you his point of contact and name.
Great. I'm familiar with the name. I'm sure we know how to get a hold of them.
Okay.
Thank you.
And also from a DSPO perspective, well, first, just a shameless plug for tomorrow's panel on digital engineering and digital standards. We'll talk a little bit about a DoD-wide strategy for how we're approaching and coordinating on the development of digital standards. We don't have it all figured out. There's a lot of learning that we still need to do to figure out how do we move from paper-based human-readable documents to machine-readable documents and still have establish that governance process that in the end, those products are just as trusted and reliable as the human-readable documents that we have today.
All right, thank you.
All right, do we have any questions online? All right. So speaking to standardization workforce development, there's been a lot of turnover in the past few years amongst the DSPOs, the standardization executives, and really across the DoD. And I don't see that slowing down. I think it's a nature of just career paths and expectations today. So what are you doing, or what can we do to build and maintain a standard savvy workforce?
One of the things that we've done, we're in the process of updating our defense standardization policy and guidance. So we have, it's Department of the Air Force 60-1 policy document that was re-released this year, and that is now inclusive of Air Force and Space Force. So policy triggers, an understanding of importance and requirements, leadership direction, if you will. And then we followed that up with updates to our military standardization program instruction as well as an international standards program instructions. We have 2 updates. The international one was just recently released several weeks ago, and the Air Force policy on military standards is with our SAE right now. So that's the first, kind of like the first key step is to make sure that we've got our policy and guidance up to date, promulgated. We will follow that up with then, efforts that are building up from the bottom up, these pilot efforts, and making those connections in the middle helps us to reach out to the workforce across the variety of centers and commands that we have. I don't know if you want to comment on what.
Yeah, well, I'm taking notes every time Ms. Baldwin talks, so it's great. But perhaps more tactically in the Navy at each SysCom level, we develop training to teach about tech authority and how that supports standardization, and that's really our opportunity, I think, to engage people in standardization, because there's no real standardization career path. It's kind of tangential to engineering or analyst career path, so we have to touch people when we can through those type of trainings. Over. Okay.
Mr. Miyamasu?
Yeah, thanks, Mike. As I mentioned earlier, part of the approach that we're looking at is working with DAU as our, I would say, principal vendor, if you might, to kind of build the academic roles and responsibility information base so that we have a commonality of terms, language, and then maybe even instruction. So that's one. The second part is more about cart and horse perspective. Ideally, we would have been trying to build depth within respective organizations, whether at the lowest levels down to the PEO and moving on up towards more of the policy level. I think with at the lower levels, because of our lack of maybe resourcing of some of the critical positions that we should have funded, kind of puts a challenge space on us for kind of building that depth. So why I say cart and horse, I think we have to, within the Army itself, look at a more predictive way for our subordinate commands and offices to have a idea of where they can at least plan to have resources to build out some of the depth in terms of putting faces into spaces, and then start working to build that depth across the formation. So it is for us a area that we continue to look at how to do it better. I'm not sure that we have all the answers right now, but we do need to work as a service to try and resource ourselves better in this space because of its importance. Over.
Maybe if I could just pile on a little bit. You've made an important connection between standards and policy, as well as universities, academia. So this is one of the things that I might point out in my career has been very successful is when we do pilots or when we do research projects with academia, many times the output is a new method, process, tool, or standard approach. Our academia, we always encourage that incorporation of those outcomes into classrooms, right? And then we can actually start to train, like I'm looking at AFIT here in the front row. It's an obvious, really quick transition that we can make, but through our UARCs, across the department and our FFRDCs, but our UARCs are university affiliated entities that offer us the opportunity to ingest those advances that we're making with the UARCs into curriculum. And then we can we're actually training those as part of our future generation, workforce generation. And then of course, leveraging DAU, like Mr. Miyamasu said. So I just want to add that on. I think that's a great linkage that we can all make because these UARCs are available to all of us.
Great, and great plug for tomorrow's keynote speaker is
Oh,
from
Super.
CERC.
You're good.
So,
Good agenda. Is there a question?
was there another question in the audience, Robin?
Yeah, hi. So Michael, you know that the Army was kind enough to give me or give DSPO Mill Standard 11991 to be the preparing activity of that standard. So we just recently updated it, but what we're discovering from the program offices and also from industry is that people are putting the entire standard on contract and having difficulty tailoring the standard to exactly what their needs are. So that's causing industry to come back and asking questions as to, do you really want all these requirements to be on contract, and having to have conversations because, as you know, if all the requirements are on contract, the cost, right, of the level of effort will increase. I'm struggling with figuring out. So I am in the process of updating the standard again and trying to figure out how to reformat it to make it more easy to tailor. Have you experienced those types of issues, and what would be your advice? And I'm wondering if making it a digital standard would help with that. Thanks.
Do you have thoughts?
So I'll just first say, Robin, I know you've got the, not on the formatting, but some guidance documents, the SDs, where we could maybe use some of those as tools to provide additional guidance on how to use that standard, Mill Standard 11991. I don't know, I have to think about how transitioning to a digital standard might help or come into play there. But any thoughts from the components?
I mean, I think we've seen this, right? You have to help it's not just about, we can produce amazing standards that are fulsome and they're complete, but it's in the application, how are we applying is just as important. And then I think one of the things, if you ask this question that maybe, Phil Zimmerman tomorrow, she would also say, and compliance is also important. Understanding, number one, I think two of the challenges that I've seen, kind of cause unintended consequences are failure to tailor appropriately, and then not really understanding with the diligence needed of what you're placing on the contract. And then the other challenge is asserting compliance, helping the program team, the government team, and the performing team understanding what we really mean by being compliant with a standard, because it's not always perhaps intuitive or ingestible in their processes. So I think these are great challenges to work through, perhaps with our digital approach as well. It's a good attribute to seek.
Yeah, I would add, to give kind of a more tactical answer, is what I'm used to seeing is you call out a standard and then a discussion of how you intend to use the product, and then a list of exceptions to the standard that you don't have to meet. Something can be hundreds or more pre-approved waivers, if you will. Over.
And I think to extend the comments just made, it would be about risk acceptance and really raising those areas that I guess I'll call them challenge areas where cost, benefit, and standards kind of come to a head. I think most of the I'll speak just from the Army. I think we try to do a good job in bringing those up for consideration. I'm not sure that it always gets to the highest levels for brief out on all of the conflicts, because I think some of that's kind of worked out at the lower levels. But ultimately, to me, it's really that balance between risk acceptance that the the services have to accept or not, based upon really what the standards are and what the contract requirements should be over.
I really like that risk-based approach as well. So piling on again to a really good, important point that you just made, Mr. Miyamasu, I think our leadership in the Department of the Air Force is really taking that on. How can we take appropriate risk and maybe tailor some of our policies and standards during, prototyping and evaluation, and then development phase, and then tightening those up and kind of then you become kind of unable to take as much risk, of course, before you're entering into production, and where it becomes more costly. That risk becomes costly in multiple different potential ways. But that's a very new feature of what we're trying to implement in our acquisition process, is really thinking about how we can allow more risk to be taken through excursions, prototyping, software-based driven designs, and easing up on allowing some of those standards to be maybe waived, accepted, but then tighten up later on. And the digital, kind of that growing knowledge and digital footprint of the system allows us to do that in a more streamlined fashion, building on that data as we generate it. Jay.
So are you thinking about risk-based compliance or risk-based tailoring, or both?
Both, I think. Yes. Specifically, one of the great projects that our team led last year was to take our airworthiness certification process and our risk acceptance process for airworthiness and relook from a number of ways. The type of program that we were applying, like, was it an experiment? Was it a commercial, a COTS evaluation? Was it a major system development? And doing risk-based tailoring of that policy towards those applications, which allowed us to delegate risk approval authorities appropriately, maybe waive completely. In the case of commercial, we're not going to take on that risk of a commercial kind of design like we would for a government design. So, and then I think this gets into, how you would tailor for test and certification acceptance too, at what point, allowing us to move forward in this age of continuous software builds and deliveries, right? Very agile. What was happening, our airworthiness process was crashing because every time you generate a new block of software, which can be weeks to months, we had to go through our airworthiness policy process would come on down and say, okay, well, we have to stop you now and recertify. That was causing tremendous delays and unnecessary oversight. So just looking into these and, kind of instantiations of the practices, Jay, I think both from a, risk, position, attributes of the system that you're generating or the program that you're building, and then what is the exposure of the risk based on, where you are in the life cycle.
All right, with that, thank you for the insightful remarks and leadership. And I think let's break for lunch now. It's about that time. Yeah, thank you.
Perfect.
Thank you. Yes. And thank you online, Mr. Miyamasu, for joining us.
Yeah, thank you, Michael. Great forum, and thanks to the distinguished panel for helping us out with this endeavor. Thank you.